Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Parenting Through the Parsha with Rabbi Matt Shapiro.
The school year has been underway for a couple of weeks now, and we're still getting into the rhythm of things. And I would say that though there is always, to a certain extent, some back and forth with the kids as we're getting through the day, getting through the week, particularly during times of transition, such as in the beginning of school, there is some amount of attitude, sass, talking back as we get into the swing of things, whether that is the sort of free-floating, not quite sure how to even respond to it attitude from a 6-year-old to the more fully formed, often pointier snark of a 13-year-old. There is some element of this where turnabout is fair play. I don't know that I necessarily won the award for sassiest teenager in my day, but I certainly dished out my fair share. But that doesn't make it any less aggravating or challenging to deal with as a parent. And there's a real question of what is a logical consequence, how to respond, what's the way in which navigating attitude, not outright defiance per se, but how do I grapple with how to respond when I get that kind of behavior from my kids. This Parsha, Teitzei, has the most mitzvot of any Parsha in the Torah. Some of them are a bit challenging to the perspective of someone living in the U.S. in 2024. But one of them is particularly challenging, particularly through a parenting lens that may be familiar to some of you, the concept of the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and defiant son, which lays out in chapter 21, if there is a wayward and defiant son who does not heed his mother or father, does not obey them, even after they discipline him, he's brought to the elders of the community, and they say to those elders, this son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Thereupon all the men of his town shall stone him to death. This is the extreme upon the extreme of how this would be handled. And it's really troubling that our holy text, core of our religious civilization, tells us that there is a situation in which a child would be behaving so badly that they would be killed. It also ends up being one of the paradigmatic examples of narrowly reading a Torah text through the rabbinic lens. The formal designation for this is a diuk, a limited reading. And it's not just one, it's a diuk upon a diuk upon a diuk. And the Talmud goes through and lays out one after another consideration for how this text should be read so narrowly to the point of not being efficacious at all, that it's within a very specific time frame, that the boy would be eating a precise amount of meat and drinking a precise amount of wine, that it's boys and not girls, that the money would need to be stolen in order to purchase these things, and so on and so on and so on, to almost the comical that the mother and father would have to be of exactly the same height, that they would look the same, that their voices would sound the same, etc., etc. To the point that after you've read that rabbinic text, you would say, well, that basically would never happen. And then there's a voice in the Talmud that indeed says, and this never even was a situation that occurred. And I would encourage people, I'm pulling some of the summary from Rabbi B'nai Lappy's piece, who's founded Svara, and it's a wonderful essay. I encourage folks to check it out, to read it. And this sense that then if the verse is being narrowed so much, why even consider it? If this is going to be something that it never happened, we're going to read it so narrowly to the point where it's not even a consideration for us functionally. What's the point of having that verse there? Why even bother including the verses in the Torah? And the Gemara's answer says, Drosh v'kabel schar, that you should interpret it and receive a reward. So then, of course, the question is, well, what's the reward? Sometimes, actually, oftentimes, as a parent, I want to protect my kids. I don't want them to be uncomfortable. I don't want them to experience pain. I don't want them to navigate the icky and challenging and painful elements of the world. And I can't bubble wrap my kids. Because ultimately, if I do, I'm not letting them build resiliency. I'm not letting them develop the calluses that they need to walk in the world through moments that are sometimes painful and sometimes difficult. That's just how life is sometimes. And that should be age appropriate. And that shouldn't be pushing them to too much too soon. And sometimes things are tough. If all I do is take out the parts of our tradition that are pointy or sometimes feel icky or uncomfortable or maybe even downright wrong to my eyes, not only am I going to be taking a marker and Xing out big swaths of things sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot, as might be the case with this Parsha, but I'm also eliminating my ability to figure out how to grapple with things that are painful and difficult. And being able to do that actively and with good conscience and with integrity, that does bring reward, because that brings a way of thinking about things with complexity and with depth and with nuance and grappling with challenges of our past and how we make it relevant and what it is then to carry an ancient and still relevant religious civilization on into the future. That's the reward, developing those skills. And so when I think about what I want to be transmitting to my kids, that's something really significant. To be able to ask the question of, hey, this seems like it's really not okay. What are we going to do about it? And to have that conversation together. Because ultimately then, on a meta level, if I'm thinking about moments with my kids that feel challenging, that's going to happen. There are also going to be moments when they find me challenging, and I don't have the luxury of saying, no, pass, just not going to deal with it. I have to deal with it. We have to deal with the stuff that feels really challenging. And potentially then a gift of our tradition is offering us the holy challenge and obligation to figure out how to deal with the things that are hard with honesty, not shying away from it, not saying this is tough, I just don't want to deal with it, but to say, hey, this feels really hard right now. I'm going to approach this to the best of my ability and I'm going to grapple with it. And that through that, even though it's uncomfortable and painful, there will be some kind of reward through the process of figuring out how to navigate those sometimes very choppy waters to come out on the other side with some type of reward, some type of learning, some type of way of, yes, having moved through and with those painful and pointy elements to come out to the other side and to know and have faith and hope that will still be okay.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.